Chapter 11. The Shining. There were 4 bags in a pile just outside the door. 3 of them were giant, battered old suitcases covered with black imitation alligator hide. The last was an oversized zipper bag with a faded tartan skin. "Guess you can handle that one, can't you?" Halloran asked him. He picked up 2 of the big cases in one hand and hoisted the other under his arm. "Sure," Danny said. He got a grip on it with both hands and followed the cook down the porch steps, trying manfully not to grunt and give away how heavy it was. A sharp and cutting fall wind had come up since they had arrived. It whistled across the parking lot, making Danny wince his eyes down to slits as he carried the zipper bag in front of him, bumping on his knees. A few errant aspen leaves rattled and turned across the now mostly deserted asphalt, making Danny think momentarily of that night last week when he had wakened out of his nightmare and had heard, or thought he heard at least, Tony telling him not to go. Multitasking. See, I don't have that much of an attention span. Alright. He said, wah, 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 wah. Halloran set his bags down by the trunk of a beige Plymouth Fury. "This ain't much car," he confided to Danny. "Just a rental job. My Bessie's on the other end. She's the car. 1950 Cadillac, and does she run sweet? I'll tell the world. I keep her in Florida because she's too old for all this mountain climbing. You need a hand with that?" "No, sir," Danny said. He managed to carry it the last 10 or 12 steps without grunting, and set it down with a large sigh of relief. "Good boy," Halloran said. He produced a large key ring from the pocket of his blue serge jacket and unlocked the trunk. As he lifted the bags in, he said, "You shine hard, boy. Harder than anyone I ever met in my life, and I'm 60 years old this January." "Huh? You got a knack," Halloran said, turning to him. "Me, I've always called it the shining." Hold on, I have to readjust the book. That's what my grandmother called it too. She had it. We used to sit in the kitchen when I was a boy no older than you and have long talks without even opening our mouths." "Really?" Halloran smiled at Danny's open-mouthed, almost hungry expression and said, "Come on up and sit in the car with me for a few minutes. Want to talk to you." Hold on. I'm going to move the tray that I'm using to set my laptop on back a little bit. So give me just a second. By the way, this is all raw footage you're seeing. I can't edit any of it, or it would mess with the sync. But so what you're seeing is just, like I said, raw footage. Here we go. Let me get back to the page. There we go. He slammed the trunk. In the lobby of the Overlook, Wendy Torrance saw her son get into the passenger side of Halloran's car as the big black cook slid in behind the wheel. A sharp pang of fear struck her, and she opened her mouth to tell Jack that Halloran had not been lying about taking their son to Florida. There was a kidnapping afoot. But they were only sitting there. She could barely see the small silhouette of her son's head, turning attentively toward Halloran's big one. Even at this distance, that small head had a set. Even at this distance, that small head had a set to it that she recognized. It was the way her son looked when there was something on the TV that particularly fascinated him, or when he and his father were playing old maid or idiot cribbage. Jack, who was still looking around for Ullman, had noticed. Wendy kept silent, watching Halloran's car nervously, wondering what they could possibly be talking about that would make Danny cock his head that way. In the car, Halloran was saying, "Get you kinda lonely thinking you were the only one." Danny, who had been frightened as well as lonely sometimes, nodded. "Am I the only one you ever met?" he asked. Halloran laughed and shook his head. "No, child, no. But you shine the hardest." "Are there lots, then?" "No," Halloran said, "but you do run across them. A lot of folks, they got a little bit of shine to 'em. They don't even know it. But they always seem to show up with flowers when their wives are feeling blue with the monthlies. They do good on school tests they don't even study for. They got a good idea how people are feeling as soon as they walk in a room. I come across 50 or 60 like that, but maybe only a dozen count my gram that knew they were shining." He said, "Wah, wah, 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 wah." "Wow," Danny said and thought about it. Then, "Do you know Mrs. Brant?" Hope I don't run out of tea. Bed sheets. "Her?" Halloran asked scornfully. "She don't shine. Just sends her supper back 2, 3 times every night." "I know she doesn't," Danny said earnestly. "But, but do you know the man in the gray uniform that gets the cars?" Wow. Too much. "Mike?" "Sure I know Mike. What about him?" "Mr. Halloran, why would she want his pants?" "What are you talking about, boy?" "Well, when she was watching him, she was thinking she would like to get into his pants, and I just wondered why." But he got no further. Halloran had thrown his head back, and rich, dark laughter issued from his chest, rolling around in the car like cannon fire. The seat shook with the force of it. Danny smiled, puzzled, and at last the storm subsided by fits and starts. Mm. Uh, People. Uh, Halloran produced a large silk handkerchief from his breast pocket like a white flag of surrender and wiped his streaming eyes. "Boy," he said, still snorting a little, "you're going to know everything there is to know about the human condition before you make 10. I don't know if to envy you or not. But Mrs. Brant, you never mind her," he said, "and don't go asking your mom either. You'd only get her upset. Dig what I'm saying?" "Yes, sir," Danny said. He dug it perfectly well. He had upset his mother that way in the past. "That Mrs. Bryan is just a dirty old woman with an itch. That's all you have to know." He looked at Danny speculatively. "How hard can you hit, Doc?" "Huh? Give me a blast. Think at me. I want to know if you got as much as I think you do." "What do you want me to think?" "Anything. Just think it hard." "Okay," Danny said. He considered it for a moment, then gathered his concentration and flung it at Halloran. He had never done anything precisely like this before, and at the last instant some instinctive part of him rose up and blunted some of the thought's raw force. He didn't want to hurt Mr. Halloran. Still, the thought arrowed out of him like a force he never would have believed. It was like a Nolan Ryan fastball with a little extra on it. "Gee, I hope I don't hurt him." And the thought was, "Hi, Dick!" Halloran winced and jerked backward on the seat. His teeth came together with a hard click, drawing blood from his lower lip in a thin trickle. His hands flew up involuntarily from his lap to the level of his chest and then settled back again. For a moment his eyelids fluttered limply with no conscious control, and Danny was frightened. "Mr. Halloran? Dick? Are you okay?" "I don't know," Halloran said and laughed weakly. "Honest to God, don't. My God, boy, you're a pistol. I didn't go as hard as I could, Danny confessed. I was scared to, at the last minute. Probably good luck you did. My brains would be leaking out my ears. He saw the alarm on Danny's face and smiled. No harm done. What did it feel like to you? Like I was Nolan Ryan throwing a fastball, he replied promptly. You like baseball, do you? Halloran was rubbing his temples gingerly. Daddy and me like the Angels, Danny said. The Red Sox in the American League East and the Angels in the West. We saw the Red Sox against Cincinnati in the World Series. I was a lot littler then, and Daddy was. Danny's face went dark and troubled. Was what, Dan? I forget, Danny said. He started to put his thumb in his mouth to suck it. That was a baby trick. He put his hand back in his lap. Can you tell me what your mom and dad are thinking, Danny? Halloran was watching him closely. Most times if I want to, but I usually don't try. Why not? Well, he paused for a moment troubled. I'm discussing Halloween costume ideas. Fitting that I'm reading The Shining and discussing Halloween ideas. And yes, I have started planning for Halloween early. Uh, he paused for a moment, troubled. It would be like peeking into the bedroom and watching them while they're doing the thing that makes babies. Do you know that thing? I've had acquaintance with it, Halloran said gravely. They wouldn't like that, and they wouldn't like me peeking at their things. It would be dirty. I see. But I know how they're feeling, Danny said. I can't help that. I know how you're feeling, too. I hurt you. I'm sorry. It's just a headache. I've had hangovers that were worse. Can you read other people, Danny? I can't read yet at all, Danny said, except a few words. But Daddy's going to teach me this winter. My daddy used to teach reading and writing in a big school. Mostly writing, but he knows reading, too. I mean, can you tell me what anybody's thinking? Uh, Danny thought about it. I can if it's loud, he said finally, like Mrs. Bryan in the pants. Or like once when me and Mommy were in this big store to get some shoes, there was this big kid looking at radios and he was thinking about taking one without buying it. Then he'd think, what if I get caught? Then he'd think, I really want it. But then he'd think about getting caught again. He was making himself sick about it, and he was making me sick. Mommy was talking to the man who sells the shoes, so I went over and said, Kid, don't take that radio. Go away. And he got really scared. He went away fast. Halloran was grinning broadly. I bet he did. Can you do anything else, Danny? Is there only thoughts and feelings, or is there more? Cautiously, is there more for you? Sometimes, Halloran said. Not often. Sometimes. Sometimes there are dreams. Do you dream, Danny? Sometimes, Danny said. I dream when I'm awake, after Tony comes. His son wanted to go into his mouth again. He had never told anyone but Mommy and Daddy about Tony. He made his thumb-sucking hand go back into his lap. Who's Tony? And suddenly, Danny had one of those flashes of understanding that frightened him most of all. It was like a sudden glimpse of some incomprehensible machine that might be safe or might be deadly dangerous. He was too young to know which. He was too young to understand. "What's wrong?" he cried. "You're asking me all this because you're worried, aren't you? Why are you worried about me? Why are you worried about us?" Halloran put his large dark hands on the small boy's shoulders. "Stop," he said. "It's probably nothing. But if it is something, well, you got a large thing in your head, Danny. You have to do a lot of you'll have to do a lot of growing yet before you can catch up to it, I guess. You got to be brave about it." "But I don't understand things," Danny burst out. "I do, but I don't. People, they feel things and I feel them, but I don't know what I'm feeling." He looked down at his lap wretchedly. "I wish I could. Sometimes Sometimes Tony shows me signs and I hardly read any of them." "Who's Tony?" Halloran asked again. Mommy and Daddy call him Mommy and Daddy call him my invisible playmate, Danny said, reciting the words carefully. "But he's really real. At least, I think he is. Sometimes, when I try real hard to understand things, he comes. He says, 'Danny, I want to show you something.' And it's like I pass out. Only, they're dreams, like you said." He looked at Halloran and swallowed. "They used to be nice, but now I can't remember the word for dreams that scare you and make you cry." "Nightmares?" Halloran asked. "Yes, that's right, nightmares. About this place? About the Overlook?" Danny looked down at his thumb-sucking hand again. "Yes," he whispered. Then he spoke shrilly, looking up into Halloran's face. "But I can't tell my daddy, and you can't either. He has to have this job because it's the only one Uncle Al could get for him, and he has to finish his play or he might start doing the bad thing again, and I know what that is. It's getting drunk. That's what it is. It's when he used it's when he used to always be drunk, and that was a bad thing to do." He stopped on the verge of tears. "Shh," Halloran said, and pulled Danny's face against the rough serge of his jacket. It smelled faintly of mothballs. "That's all right, son, and if that thumb likes your mouth, let it go where it wants." But his face was troubled. He said, "What you got, son, I call it shining on. The Bible calls it having visions, and there's scientists that call it precognition. I've read up on it, son. I've studied on it. They all mean seeing the future. Do you understand that?" Danny nodded against Halloran's coat. "I remember the strongest shine I ever had that way. I'm not liable to forget. It was 1955. I was still in the army then, stationed overseas in West Germany. It was an hour before supper, and I was standing by the sink giving one of the KPs hell for taking too much of the potato along with the peel. I says, 'Here, let me show you how that's done.' He held out the potato and the peeler, and then the whole kitchen was gone. Bang, just like that. You say you see this guy Tony before you have dreams." Danny nodded. Halloran put an arm around him. "With me it's smelling oranges. All that afternoon I've been smelling them and thinking nothing of it, because they were on the menu for that night. We had 30 crates of Valencias. Everyone in the damn kitchen was smelling oranges that night." Oh, people. For a minute it was like I'd just passed out, and then I heard an explosion and saw flames. There were people screaming, sirens, and I heard this hissing noise that could only be steam. Then it seemed like I got a little closer to whatever it was, and I saw a railroad car off the tracks, and land on its side with Georgia and South Carolina Railroad written on it. And I knew like a flash that my brother Carl was on that train. and it jumped the tracks and Carl was dead. Just like that. Then it was gone, and here's this scared, stupid little KP in front of me, still holding up that potato in the peeler. He says, "Are you okay, Sarge?" And then I say, "No, my brother's just been killed down in Georgia." And when I finally got my mama on the overseas telephone, she told me how it was. But see, boy, I already knew how it was. He shook his head slowly as if dismissing the memory, and looked down at the wide-eyed boy. "But the thing you gotta remember, my boy, is this. Ghost things don't always come true. I remember, just 4 years ago I had a job cooking at a boys' camp up in Maine on Long Lake. So I'm sitting by this boarding gate at Logan Airport in Boston just waiting to get on my flight, and I start to smell oranges for the first time in maybe 5 years. So I say to myself, my God, what's coming on this crazy late show now? And I got down to the bathroom and sat on one of the toilets to be private. I never did black out, but I started to get this feeling stronger and stronger that my plane was going to crash. Then the feeling went away, and the smell of oranges, and I knew it was over. I went back to the Airlines desk and changed my flight to one 3 hours later. Do you know what happened? What? Danny whispered. Nothing! Halloran said and laughed. He was relieved to see the boy smile a little too. Not a single thing. That old plane landed right on time and without a single bump or bruise. So you see, sometimes those feelings don't come to anything. He's very energetic. This is a very energetic character. I can't keep up with him. He's unlike any character in this story. Oh, Danny said, will you take the racetrack? I go a lot and I usually do pretty well. I stand by the rail when they go, by the starting gate, and sometimes I get a little shine about this horse or that one. Usually those feelings help me get real well. I always tell myself that someday I'm going to get three at once on three long shots and make enough on the trifecta to retire early. It hadn't happened yet, but there's plenty of times I've come home from the track on Shanksmar instead of in a taxicab with my wallet swollen up. Nobody shines on all the time except for maybe God up in heaven. Yes, sir, Danny said, thinking of the time almost a year ago when Tony had showed him a new baby lying in a crib at their house in Stovington. It had been very excited. He had been very excited about that and had waited, knowing that it took time, but there had been no new baby. Now you listen, Halloran said and took both of Danny's hands in his own. I've had some bad dreams here, and I've had some bad feelings. I've worked here for 2 seasons now, and maybe a dozen times I've had, well, nightmares. And let's see, maybe half a dozen times I've thought I've seen things. No, I won't say what. It ain't for a little boy like you. Just nasty things. Once it had something to do with those damn hedges clipped to look like animals. Another time there was a maid, Dolores Vicky her name was, and she had a little shine to her, but I don't think she knew it. Mr. Ullman fired her. Do you know what that is, Doc? Yes, sir, Danny said candidly. My daughter. My daddy got fired from his teaching job, and that's why we're in Colorado, I guess. Daughter. Well, Ullman fired her on account of her saying she'd seen something in one of the rooms where a bad thing happened. That was room 217, and I want you to promise me you won't go in there, Danny. Not all winter. Steer right clear. All right, Danny said. Did the maiden, did she ask you to go look? Yes, she did. And there was a bad thing there, but I don't think it was a bad thing that could hurt anyone, Danny. That's what I'm trying to say. People who shine can sometimes see things that are gonna happen. I think sometimes they can see things that did happen, but they're just like pictures in a book. Did you ever see a picture in a book that scared you, Danny? Yes, he said, thinking of the story of Bluebeard and the picture where Bluebeard's new wife opens the door and sees all the heads. But you knew it couldn't hurt you, didn't you, Danny? Oh, didn't you? You yes, Danny said a little dubious. Well, that's how it is in the hotel. I don't know why, but it seems that all the bad things that ever happened here. There's little pieces of them still lying around like fingernail clippings or the boogers that somebody nasty just wiped under a chair. What? Uh, like fingernail clippings or the boogers that somebody nasty just wiped under a chair. Oh, okay. Alright. I don't know why it should just be here. There's bad goings on just about in every hotel in the world, I guess. And I've worked in a lot of them and had no trouble. Only here. But Danny, I don't think those things can hurt anybody. He emphasized each word in a sentence with a mild shake of the boy's shoulder. So if you should see something in a hallway or a room or outside by those hedges, just look the other way, and when you look back it'll be gone. Are you digging me? Yes, Danny said. He felt much better, soothed. He got up on his hands, kissed Halloran's cheek, and gave him a big hard hug. Halloran hugged back. When he released the boy, he asked, "Your folks, they don't shine, do they?" "No, I don't think so." I get belchy when I drink. I'm sorry. But the tea's delicious, so I can't help it. "I tried them like I did you," Halloran said. "Your mama jumped the tiniest bit. I think all mothers shine, you know. At least until their kids grow up enough to watch out for themselves. Your dad—" Halloran paused momentarily. He had probed at the boy's father, and he just didn't know. It wasn't like meeting someone who had the shine, or someone who definitely did not. Poking at Danny's father had been strange. As if Jack Torrance had something that he was hiding, or something he was holding in so deeply submerged in himself that it was impossible to get to. "I don't think he shines at all," Halloran finished. "So you don't worry about them. You just take care of yourself. I don't think there's anything here that can hurt you. So just be cool, okay?" "Danny! Hey, Doc!" Danny looked around. "That's Mom. She wants me. I have to go." "I know you do," Halloran said. "You have a good time here, Danny. Best you can, anyway." "I will. Thanks, Mr. Halloran. I feel a lot better." The smiling thought came in his mind. "Dick to my friends." "Yes, okay, Dick." Their eyes met, and Dick Halloran winked. Danny scrambled across the seat of the car and opened the passenger side door. As he was getting out, Halloran said, "Danny?" "What?" "If there is any trouble, you give a call." "Oops. You give a call. A big loud holler like the one you gave me a few minutes ago. I might hear you even way down in Florida, and if I do, I'll come on the run." "Okay," Danny said and smiled. "You take care, big boy." "I will." Danny slammed the door and ran across the parking lot toward the porch, where Wendy stood holding her elbows against the chill wind. Halloran watched the big grin slowly fading. "I don't think there's anything here that can hurt you. I don't think. But what if he was wrong?" He had known that this was his last season at the Overlook ever since he had seen that thing in the bathroom of room 217. It had been worse than any picture in any book, and from here the boy running to his mother looked so small. "I don't think." His eyes drifted down to the topiary animals. Abruptly he started the car and put it in gear and drove away, trying not to look back. And of course he did, and of course the porch was empty. They had gone back inside. It was as if the Overlook had swallowed them. That's the end of chapter 11. I will be right back with chapter 12. Enjoy.